Help capture the history of our markets by contributing to the John Lothian News GoFundMe campaign to support the Markets Wiki Education history-focused video series and more.
Advantage Futures is proud to sponsor JLN Video Series.
Many include a recurring theme of people helping others during critical times in their trading careers.
Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person.
Advantage prioritizes you.
Personalized service, competitive pricing, aimed at giving you every advantage.
Make us your advantage.
Advantage Futures.
Having a clearing firm and having some of the people that were involved. I remember going to some life cycle event a week, and the lady in front of me in line at the buffet asked me what I did, and I told her, and she started screaming at me, "Oh, you're one of those drug dealers from the CBOE." I said, "No, I'm not a drug dealer at the CBOE." But I mean, unfortunately, that's what the community, the outside community, thought of us at that particular point. That was right after I spoke about it earlier, the Johnny paycheck coming down and things like that. We did have, like I said, we had the same kinds of bad habits on the trading floor from successful traders that rock stars had, but without the audience. So, a lot of money and young, and it was that time, and it was the 80s, 70s and 80s. In law school, they teach you there's two kinds of crimes. There's mala prohibita and mala in se. Prohibita is basically going over the limit, the trading limits, that type of thing. And mala in se is innately wrong, stealing, whatever, murder, things like that. I think, what I've seen, and unfortunately, I had to get involved a lot of times, because if it was our customers, they would come to me, is a lot of things that got interpreted as that weren't mala prohibita, but were basically acted on as if they were mala in se. And I'll give you an example. We had a guy who came down and bought a CBOE seat at $10,000, who was a back office guy for one of the firms. And he was a very, very much a journeyman trader. He was in the same pit every day, made a very nice living, much more than he ever made when he was working for one of the firms. Never really had much in the way of positions. If they were much less risk than he had in his account. And one day he comes into me and he says, they just served me with papers from the Business Conduct Committee. This is on the CBOE. And I said, what happened? And what happened was that evidently one of the firms was over the limit. And without telling him, they came to him the next morning and they said, will you do us a favor and break this particular trade? And he was very uncomfortable with it. He said he didn't, whatever the cost was of breaking the trade back, after they'll write him a check, whatever it was. So he said, fine. And it turned out that they were trying to avoid being in trouble for going over the limit by breaking that trade. It put him under the limit. It wasn't even that big of a trade. And he got in trouble for it, for trading before the opening, because he broke the trade that wasn't supposed to be broken. It was a real trade, and a whole long list of, the lawyer could trump up. This was somebody's grandfather. I mean, I knew this guy from the day I started. He was the cleanest, straightest, guy on the floor. I shouldn't take credit for this, but because of my original write-up that I did about whether people were broker dealers when I was at Arthur Young, before I ever got involved at the CBOE, I had a sense that you could actually defer paying taxes by lifting the losing leg of a spread, reestablishing it in the market, and letting the winning side flow over into the next year. So I explained that to people, how to do it, and how, in my opinion, it could be done properly. Again, I'm a tax lawyer by education. What was happening was, it's the telephone game. By the time people heard about how you could do this, they were basically they were prearranging trades, which is illegal. They were lifting the leg by somebody else who had a prearranged trade knocking it off. And in some cases, the brokers were making a fortune because the floor brokers would take a 2,000 lot of something in a stock that was flying around. They would find the safest possible spread to put on, and then do the other side with another one of their customers. And they were getting paid full boat brokerage, was like $1.50 a contract on a 2,000 lot spread twice. So you're talking about 8,000 contracts with at $1 or $1.50 for just basically filling out a card and not really doing them properly in the market. So we had a lot of that. It really resulted in 1984 in them getting rid of that ability to be able to defer those losses by marking everything to the market. And so that went away. In a lot of cases, it caught numbers of traders by surprise because they had been doing this for so long. They were actually rolling income in the lower tax brackets, which they shouldn't. So it came back in 84 tax brackets. So then the game became trying to switch it into long-term capital gains. Well, when I first started, it was very interesting. You couldn't rent a seat, and you had to buy a seat. And seats weren't crazy expensive. I mean, I got down there essentially, let's say 75, and the board of trade had gone up. So what happened was, we had a number of our older clerks, guys like Tony Flakus and Jimmy Leahy at the board of trade. Guys would get together, and if there was a stand-up clerk, they would give him money to buy a seat. And then when he'd buy the seat, the first thing he would do would be to pay back that money. And it was very, very common. It was the way a lot of younger guys who didn't have any money got started, and some of them turned out to be extremely successful from it. So I was able to see that at the beginning, and that being a tax lawyer and looking for loopholes, essentially, and being in an environment where, somebody would go like this and the trade was done. And if 2 minutes later it went against you or it went your way, seeing that mentality was interesting. I mean, it really is what attracted me and brought me down to stay down at the CBOE and get involved. It was just it was different than what I was basically educated to do. So I saw a lot of it. I saw there, like my daughter, we sold, I don't know, some ridiculous amount of Girl Scout cookies, because I'd go around the floor with my board of trading cards on the CBOE, the hard cardboard ones, and I'd give them a card and I'd say, write down what kind of cookies you want. And I don't know, at that time, give me $20 or $25, whatever it was, for a box of them. And you can't mix it all the same. And I think I sold 500 boxes of cookies or something like that. How important your word is. Your word is your bond. When I first started trading, I was trading in IBM. And I was a fairly new trader, and I was, I'd been down a couple of years. I talked to a lot of people. I sort of thought I knew the rules. I had an out trade with somebody, and the out trade was I was trying to sell a 20 lot, and he bought 10, and then I went to a lower price, and he ignored me, so I sold him to somebody else. But I didn't realize he was carding it, because if he bought him at the higher price, he should be able to buy him at the lower price, kind of thing. And the next day, or the 10 lot, was $3,000 against me. And I was positive I didn't make that trade with him. So I told him that, and we argued a little bit, but it was, friendly arguing. And then I didn't feel good about it. So I went upstairs and I asked Dave Goldberg, how do you handle this? And he said to me, you know what? He's an honest guy. You've known him for a while. He was a board of trade member who had moved over to the CBOE. And he said, honest people, you split the trade with them. I mean, it's not a question of integrity. It's a question of, an honest mistake by two people. He would do the same thing for you. So I went back down before the opening. The openings were 9 in those days. And I said to him, I should split the trade. I made a mistake. He says, no, you don't have to do it. It's not, blah, blah, blah. He went on. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, I made another trade with him, and he was ignoring me. I'm going, sold. And he's just acting like I'm not there. So I take him aside afterwards. I didn't know how upset he was from the first thing. He says, I can't depend on trading with you if the next day I'm going to have an out trade. And it made me feel about this big. And it was a very humbling lesson. We're good friends today. I mean, we were good friends on the trading floor for a long time, but I learned a lesson from it. I learned how important it was to establish your character down there and who you are, and the integrity of trading. I mean, I think one question I saw was, biggest out trades and things like that. And I've seen some, not that I was involved with them, but because of the clearing firm, I've seen some whoppers. People go crazy and fight, and other people say, look, and I know this guy and I know he made an honest mistake. And so I think a lot of the dealing with people and understanding that, not losing your temper right away, a lot of good life lessons from being on a trading floor. Clearly, Dave Goldberg, he taught me pretty much everything I knew about the floor and trading and, how to run things. He was a very, rigid. I don't know what I would say. He wasn't a speculator mentality. He was a grinder. The Cashmans were a big influence on us. Bobby and Dave. Bobby particularly was good friends with Gene Cashman. We called him Uncle Gene. But you could get on the elevator, and here's a guy who was a legend at the Board of Trade, and you'd hear this voice on the other side say, "Hey, Shelly, how you doing?" And you look over, and it was Uncle Gene. He was that kind of person. I was fortunate enough to be able to get into some of his deals, and so there were all these sort of legendary people I met. There were, from foreigners that were at the Board of Trade that, were very close to the best, and they wanted to trade options. So I'd wind up becoming friends with them. And, they were very secretive and things like that. But I would say Dave. I was influenced by Mike Mealy from a back office standpoint. He wasn't, college educated or anything, but I think he got involved at the Midwest he got involved as a commodity clerk because he used to sell newspapers outside the Midwest Stock Exchange, that type of thing. Joe Sullivan was a very big influence on me. He got me involved in the exchange. He sent me to do things outside for the exchange that were very beneficial to me. Made some great contacts. Doc Sander was another person. He was very close with Dave, so he would come up a lot of times, even after he originally started the whole concept of the bond. He was the one that we hired for. He was from Berkeley. He was a professor, and he was research and development. After Joe Sullivan started the CBOE, they decided to get the financial futures going with him. And I still, to this day, I talked to him not too long ago, but he was a big influence. Learned a lot from him. I remember in terms of stories, I remember he brought a bunch of Swiss bankers down to watch the opening in the bond pit when it was in its heyday with 500-600 traders there. And they were in the viewing area that sort of went over the pit. And when the bell went off and the market opened and the chaos cleared, he asked them, pretty impressive, huh? What did you think of that? And one guy said, I've never seen more Rolex watches in my life in one spot, which was basically, sort of summed it up what the bond pit was like in those days. Well, eventually I became sort of a dinosaur. I mean, it was a combination of, as the business grew, like I said, we went to 350 employees and all over the place. We even owned seats on the Life and things like that. And the security side of it, even though I was involved in the commodities on the risk management and compliance and CFO functions, for the most part, I had 3 other partners that were full-time commodity people that were at the Board of Trade. So consequently, I managed, I think, about 80% of the business at that particular point. So as the business got more involved and there were more issues, there was less and less time to trade. And like I said earlier, it was hard to trade just the openings and the closes.
Advantage Futures is proud to sponsor this JLN video series. In many of the series videos, there are recurring themes of people being helped at critical times in their trading careers. Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person. At Advantage, you are our priority. Everyone needs an edge or advantage when trading. Make us your advantage.
John Lothian News would like to thank those individuals who have contributed to our Markets Wiki Education GoFundMe campaign. Their financial assistance allows us to produce and distribute videos like this for our Open Outcry Traders History Project or the Path to Electronic Trading video series. Join them in supporting John Lothian News, capturing the history of our industry.